Um, okay, everyone. Well, welcome back to this afternoon's final session. And thanks so much for everyone for participating so much in the last session and in this morning's session. Now I really look forward to introducing my good friend and colleague, Professor Anne Phoenix, whose work will be well known to many of you. Anne is Professor of Psychosocial Studies at Thomas Quorum Research Unit at the Social Research Institute at University College London, and is a Fellow of the British Academy. And she is also a member of Independent SAGE, which is in the UK, the body of independent scientists who have been advising the government on their COVID strategy. Or is that wrong, Ed? Is it advising SAGE?
No, we've just been, we've not been advising the government in that SAGE does that, but we've been actually wanting to pick up the issues that we see as important that the advisors to the government haven't been able to get through.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that, but a very informed and important voice in our times across a range of topics. So, so please, Anne, welcome and thank you for agreeing to do this in your really busy schedule.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to be here and to have, you know, so far participated with some of you and heard your discussions, and I think that's been really interesting, and the sessions have been fantastic. So I've really enjoyed the last couple of days, and I'm going to share my screen. Just do that. The host has disabled my screen sharing.
Gordon, would you mind? Or maybe I can do it. Let me see if I can do that.
Either way, but I've done it now, so it should be all right. Sorry, Anne.
No problem at all. Yeah, now it's fine, thank you. Lovely. Oh. So you'll see as we go through that many of the things that I raise have come up in one way or another already with the three speakers that you've already engaged with. But I wanted to start with just an example from today in the UK to show really how, if we're thinking about narrative transformations, we have to think about something that came up very much in Corinne's presentation, that narratives are contested. There are different ways to talk about and think about issues, but that they matter. Narratives matter, and they matter both for social change and for maintenance of the status quo. You don't need to know in detail what's going on here, but in the middle of this picture is the leader of the opposition in Britain, Keir Starmer, and he's being heckled by a number of people loudly, so that in the end the police rescue him and put him into a police car. And the reason being, well, a number of different reasons, but one of them is that he used to be in charge of getting prosecutions done in Britain.
Just a second, Corinne, are you recording this session?
Yes, it's already recording. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the Prime Minister of this country, who is in rather a lot of trouble at the moment about his past behaviour, often to do with COVID, but not only, in the Houses of Parliament, blamed this man, Keir Starmer, for not prosecuting somebody who was a renowned paedophile. And so some of this attack is on that basis. Now, the narrative that Boris Johnson came up with is unfounded. it was scurrilous, it was partly to deflect from himself. But nonetheless, it shows how narratives matter, and narratives are contested, and no matter what somebody says in defense, there are other people who are likely not to believe it, and so on. And I think that this matters a great deal now, when there's also a lot of contestation, for example, around vaccinations and so on. So, I mean, that's a bit of a weird story to start with, really. But the only point about it is not that you should take away what's going on, but you should take away the point about contestations, and that narratives are always at the service of both change and maintenance of the status quo. Mm. So what I want to argue in this presentation is that this is a period of transformation where we need news stories, and perhaps in some ways we're in the process of crafting news stories, but that transformation and the stories we tell are inextricably linked. It matters what those stories are. It's not only that narratives matter, but it matters what the stories are that get taken up. And another point, and that's come up to some extent already, and will come up again, I think, for example, with Jill's presentation tomorrow, I'm sure, is that personal and socio-structural or cultural stories are inextricably linked. So they go together. And I also want, like Corinne did, to get you to try out some narrative analysis. And thinking about transformations, we really live in an interesting period where there are unexpected transformational conjunctions that have produced a lot of narrative contestations. And whether we're talking about school climate strikes, and whichever country you're in, there are different ways in which those have played out. Whether we're talking about COVID-19, and there've been lots of contestations there. Talking about George Floyd's murder and the resurgence of Black Lives Matter, and therefore the sorts of things that have happened in terms of removal of statues, etc. There's contestation there, and lots of conflicts at the moment. There are so many conflicts, lots of oppressive situations, natural disasters, and starvation around the world, and all of those elicit contestations about what should be done, what's happening, and so on. But one of the things that's interesting is that all of that has produced an explosion of personal narratives, and that those personal narratives from people are often in the service of political change for social justice. They're axiological, they have a moral take, and moral claims are being made. But as Corinne pointed out so nicely, that claims to social change are not always in the direction of progressive social change, of course not. Mm. But these conjunctions have enabled public reactions and opposition to those as well. Certainly highlighted the psychosocial impact of racism, because almost all of these have at their heart racisms of various kind, as well as other things. And I think that they have shown the importance of the psychosocial, that we can't separate the psychological and the social. And also for me, we had a little bit of debate about this yesterday, they've highlighted the importance of intersectionality, the fact that we all and all at the same time belong to multiple social groups, and that those matter. So that the fact that we belong to different social groups means that different aspects of our identities are important at different times. So thinking about these shifting stories, those stories that are being produced are about life, about ourselves, about our vulnerabilities, and so on. In Britain, we've had very particular things happening. I don't want to go into those too much, because you, wherever you are, will have other revelations, other stories. I've been very struck by the fact that cricket has featured over the last few months in Britain, which has led to a marked change in the way that people have understood the fact that cricket is not a signifier of fair play and benevolence in Britain, and that Asian cricketers, Black cricketers have been positioned in ways that have really been oppressive in clubs, as well as being omitted. So there's many people who feel unsettled by this outpouring of stories, partly because some people need to produce new understandings of their identities, partly because some people didn't understand the nature of their societies. And all of us have partial understandings of the societies in which we live, but also because there's been a recognition because of these things that there has to be a transformation. So the slogan "Build Back Better," or Biden's "Build Back Better World," is really designed to think about how we need to shift national and global practices. So shifting national stories is important to the ways in which we tell our personal stories. And we're in a period that's fascinating because of rethinking personal identities and national identities, and that those rethinkings have possibilities that are attractive and pitfalls that are less so. And those possibilities and pitfalls are different depending on the axiology, depending on the moral position, the social justice claims one makes. And as Stories Changing Life that Corinne Squire edited makes clear, we also need to re-narrate the past. And one of the lovely things about narrative theory is that it brings the past, the present, and the future into alignment and contestation, and allows re-narrations. So the very first thing that I wanted to put up is, because somebody asked yesterday about, is it always stories and always verbal, always words? And of course, you get stories, snapshots of stories that have histories and hopes for the future from pictures as well. And I'm not going to break you up for this, but perhaps everybody could just take a moment and write in the chat, what is the narrative of each of these? So if you could do one, feminism without intersectionality is just white supremacy. Let's learn from history and avoid repeating the mistakes of the past, which came from an anti-Trump women's march in 2017. So that's one. And then two, queer and trans Black Lives Matter, which was from a demonstration at Pride in 2020. If you could just spend a minute writing in the chat, what are the narratives here? This is not like homework to be marked, it's just simply so that we have some things to look at. And everybody can look at them. I mean, I'm not going to read them out. I just think you'll all get the chat later, and it's very interesting to see what people make of this. And the reason I'm not going to read them out is simply because when I'm doing talks, I'm afraid I always think of a million things I want to say and cover, and it's not feasible to do them all. But could you type into the chat? How are we doing?
People are not yet typing into the chat.
No. There's a couple of people who've typed.
Yes, now starting, yeah.
Yeah. Could everybody give it a go? It's not an exam question, so you can just do it without commitment. But it just gets you thinking in a different way, and you can look at everybody else's later. Just give you one more minute or so. Thank you. Going up. Fantastic comments. Some more, please. Wonderful. Oh. Great. Half a minute more, and then we'll move on. Lovely. Wonderful. I mean, you can add, obviously keep adding to it as you wish. But some very interesting comments already, which I hope that you will read. And one of the things about looking at these pictures is that claims are being made to altered arrangements. And those altered arrangements are to do with inclusions that of groups that have been previously excluded. So as many of you have said, it's wanting a break from the past, wanting to think differently, to, you know, so it's a narrative of the importance of social change in both cases, and so on. And we could spend a long time just thinking about what stories are being told here. You know, we know, for example, that there's a claim being made that feminism so far has been white supremacist. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any need to say this. Do you see what I mean? So it's really interesting, and we can read a great deal into images, obviously without saying who is saying something, because that's not part of what we know. But we know that those narratives are in existence, are circulating, and that they're contestatory. So very interesting. Okay. Well, there's certainly a commonplace now. It's accepted that the stories we tell to ourselves and other people matter for our identities, and that identities produce particular political action. The ways in which we identify, complicated as they are, intersectional as they are, matter for our social action. And as we've all just been doing, we've looked at Adichie's notion of stories mattering and come up with more complex ways of understanding what that means, but nonetheless recognizing that they matter. Because stories present meanings, they give explanations, and they also are populated quite often or depopulated so that we know who the actors in them are and who are memorable, people or characters or whatever. So the argument isn't that everything is storied, but that if we are to understand events of the world, the past, the present, and the future, then we do require storying. And all the talks that you've had so far make that clear in different ways. So that transformation and change requires that we shift the stories that we tell, that we use narrative imagination, as Molly Andrews puts it, in different and new ways, that it matters a great deal. And thinking about transformation, because so many people have said that what COVID-19 does is show us that we have to change, that things can't stay the same. But Gloria Ladson-Billings, who's a US educationist, says people keep saying we just need to get back to normal. And she says going back to normal for the kids who are most vulnerable is not a solution, because normal was where the problem was. I've been interested in looking at how do nations come back when they go through something catastrophic. I've looked at a major disruption in schooling, which is World War II for places like Japan and Italy. Japan, I've skipped out a bit, totally redid their school system when they came back, totally. They didn't just say, we're back, let's turn to page 27. Okay. And I think, you know, that's quite a nice narrative. It's saying we can see that you need to do something different by looking at history, okay, and looking at history of countries that are thought to be successful to do with education. Again, the point isn't to know what Gloria Ladson-Billings thinks, but to recognize that change and narratives of change are crucially important for understanding a move to the future. So there are contradictory possibilities for narratives as turning points, and turning points as a whole literature obviously on, with Glenn Elder having been really key to that. So there are points where the personal and the socio-structural collide. You know, so that it's not necessarily a smooth meeting together, the personal and the socio-structural, but they're always inextricably linked. And social inequalities and intersectionality are always key and put constraints on agency, as well as facilitating some people's agency. So we have to think about turning points as positive or negative. The future is always contingent. It's not straightforward, and narratives are part of producing that future, but also generational differences and uncertainties about the future matter. And it also is the case that we need to think about emotions, hopes, fears, as well as discomfort and opportunities and limitations and so on in dealing with change. So we need to think about understanding of people as always relational, ontology as always relational. And I've put this example here because it's about thinking about generations and environmental change and racialization. This is an activist in the US and so on. Again, not something that you need to read, but that recognizing that getting other stories onto political agenda can sometimes require that one is forceful about putting them there. It's not that people just accept that stories that they've not wanted to hear, that may have been being told for decades, should be heard now. Okay. So Indigenous-led resistance is a growing thing. Now this, I do want you to get into groups to discuss. So I'd like you to go into breakout rooms. Could you each take this and do a screen grab yourselves, because some people have been having difficulty. Molly, please also do put it in the chat. But could everybody attempt to do their own screen grab as well? Because obviously there's quite a lot of it. And I know that people had difficulty with getting.
And would you mind, Anne, stop sharing your screen, and then I'll put this in the chat anyway.
Yeah.
It's still sharing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I ended the, sorry, I ended the show but didn't stop sharing.
Perfect. Okay, give me 1 second. Corin, are you going to put people in groups, or shall I do that?
If you can put the screenshot in the chat, then.
That's what I'm going to do.
How many groups do you want, Anne? What kind of size would you like?
I think that people should be in groups of about 4, if possible, so that everybody gets a chance to talk.
So if I do 8 groups, then that will be 3 to 4. Are we ready to go? Sure.
Yeah, it's yes. Oh no, wait, 1 more second. It's just loading it up right now.
So all I want you to do is to think about, what sort of narratives are in this talk. And it is when this is a speech given to the Houses of Parliament. Okay, Greta Thunberg. So the British